Bienvenue sur la chaîne Seed of Investigator. Aujourd'hui, j'ai l'honneur de recevoir Peter Khoury, une grande histoire d'abduction le concernant, qui est historique au niveau international. Il a eu un livre qui s'appelle The Air of the Alien. Bonjour Peter, comment ça va?
I'm very well, thank you.
Je suis heureux de te recevoir et je suis content que tu aies accepté mon invitation. Est-ce que tu peux nous raconter ton histoire depuis ton enfance jusqu'à aujourd'hui, si tu es toujours contacté?
Sure, thank you for having me on your show. I hope your listeners find this to be an interesting story, but it's my story and it's a real true story that happened to me. Okay, my name's Peter Khoury. I live in Sydney, Australia. I was involved in the building trade when I was younger, and now last few years I've worked in security. I've been telling my story since the early 90s. Probably 1990, I started looking into this and talking about it, but I'd had experiences since I was a child, and my first experience happened overseas in Lebanon in the early 1970s, 1971, I'd say, and it was just a bunch of kids, me and my friends and my cousins playing. It was school holidays during summer, and we were just running around playing cowboys and Indians, and one of the kids called out, said, let's go play on the roof of the neighbor's house, and he named the family, like he said, the Amar family. And, everybody started running across the road towards that house, and my little cousin, female, she was behind me. She was about a year and a half younger than me, I believe. And she was just behind, running last. So I felt really bad, and I let her get in front of me, and I went last. And as we ran up the side of the house, we entered the building from the side door and went straight up the stairs leading up to the landing to the roof entry. And it was a single story building. So it had a security door on the roof, and it was in a frame, a steel frame. And the bottom of the frame was probably about 3 inches off the ground. So you had to step over it to get it onto the roof. And what I noticed as we ran up, I could see my friends running through the door, and it's a heavy steel door. And when we used to open it any other time, you'd open the door, and because it was so heavy, it'd come back and close on its own. So every kid would have to push the door to get through onto the roof so it doesn't hit them. So as they were running through, I noticed that none of them stopped the door. The door just stayed where it was. And as I ran through, I had my arms out like that in front of me to stop the door from hitting me, because I expected it to come back any second, and it didn't. And as I ran past the door, I was looking towards it, and I could see it was still open. It was like some magnetic force has forced this steel door to stay open. So I look at it, and then as I look ahead of me, as I take a couple more steps, I noticed that all my friends and my cousins are frozen. There was probably 7, 8 of us children up there on the roof. And in Lebanon, on the coast, the roofs are flat. Everybody, they basically live up there during the summer. They have cubby houses, they have grapevines, pigeon coops, water containments. So it's an active area. It's not a dangerous area for kids to be at. We're so used to it, grew up doing it all our lives. So we're up on the roof, and, I run out and I see all my friends. They've taken maybe 3, 4, 5 steps, and they've just frozen. Like if you see a shop mannequin, at a shopping center, in the window, you see a dummy, a statue, a mannequin, and that's what they were like. They weren't moving at all, no movement whatsoever. And for all of them not to be moving, it caught my attention quickly. So I thought it was a game. I thought they were trying to trick me, and because I was the last one on the roof. And so I walked up to them and I started trying to tickle them, you know, around the waist, around on the neck, but I wasn't getting a reaction. They weren't moving. They weren't flinching. You know, you got to tickle someone, whether they're ticklish or not, they're going to react. They're going to move. The eyes, you know, if they smile, you'll see the eyes, the wrinkles. I didn't see any of that. It was just frozen, like, you know, mannequins. And what I noticed was when I looked in their eyes, I didn't see that glitter of life. Like when you're talking to someone, you look at them, you see a glow in their eyes. I didn't see that. It was just blank, and there was nothing. It was like they weren't even alive at that time. But anyway, there was another kid. He was older than us, and he was taller than me. So I walked up to him and started tickling him around the stomach, around the waist, you know, trying to tickle him under the arms. I couldn't. So I reached up to tickle him under the throat like that. And as I looked up, I saw an egg-shaped object, exactly like an egg, big as a VW, a Volkswagen Beetle, you know, the 1970s Beetle. I noticed it was about 30 meters above us, very silent, no noise whatsoever. It was just sitting there hovering. It wasn't moving. I just saw it in one spot. And I look up and I see an egg-shaped object with the pointy end at the top. Let's say, imagine an egg, and you tilt it at a 45-degree angle. And on the outside, it was silver, like matte silver, not shiny silver. And then in the middle of it, like from just below the top to almost to the bottom, it had this oval windscreen that was tinted dark, very dark glass. It was like when you have your TV screen off and it's just dark, black. That's what it looked like. But inside of that, I could see two figures, like two people, two beings, whatever they are. I didn't know about UFOs or anything at the time. I was brought up Lebanese Christian Maronite. Never discussed this UFO stuff, didn't believe in any of it. Family never discussed it. So I didn't know what to make of it when I'm looking at it. Now, where we lived in Lebanon on the coast, we're right on the water. And we used to get a lot of helicopters. Some say Israeli, could have been Lebanese military helicopters, but very regularly on a weekly basis, helicopters would fly by very low, and you'd see the soldier sitting on the open door with his legs dangling down towards the landing gear. You know, you'd see the propeller, you'd see the repropeller, you'd see everything, you'd see the pilot. They were that close. And they throw propaganda material, like just colored paper, different colored paper, red, blue, green, white, and they throw it all over the town. And as kids, we'd just run around and collect the papers, and we'd wave at the soldier sitting in the door, you know, and he'd wave back. So we were very, very well accustomed to what a helicopter looked like. I knew exactly what helicopters looked like. So I'm looking at this thing. It had no propellers, no landing gear, no sound. And one thing you hear about helicopters is the sound, you know. So it was just really quiet, just hovering. And I could see the sun sort of reflecting of it a little bit as it moved slightly. Now, the two beings sitting inside, I couldn't see features, like I couldn't see the color of their eyes or their nose or mouth or anything. I just saw a silhouette, like a dark shadow of two very thin, very tall, two beings sitting in the front, and they weren't sitting like our helicopter pilots would sit back like this, you know. They were in a low forward-leaning position, and both of them were looking towards us. So they're about 30 meters above us. They're looking down to their left. So the being that was closest to me, so he would have been in the left seat, the other one in the right. The one in the left seat, I could see him look at me or look towards us, and then look at his partner, and then look back. And he did this repeatedly, like he was confused. And maybe because I didn't freeze like my friends, it freaked them out a little bit or confused them. So it was like they were in conversation about, you know, why isn't he like his friends? But anyway, I see them both looking towards us, and then the object drops about 5 meters. So it's around the 25-meter mark now. And as we're standing there, I don't know if any of my friends saw this because they were frozen. I don't know if when they were frozen, they were looking up or they were looking down. Most of them were looking like straight ahead. And I'm not sure if they saw anything. But all of a sudden, it drops again, and it drops to about, say, 20 meters above us, which is very close. And I thought to myself at the time, I could pick up a rock right now and probably throw it, and I'll hit it, if I threw it. And as I was thinking that, I thought, this thing's going to land. I was so sure that it was going to land on the roof, and it had plenty of room to land. But the next thing I remember is we're all downstairs. We're no longer on the roof. We're all downstairs on the floor, on the ground floor. And we're sitting, some of us are sitting on the steps and some are standing in the entryway. And we're looking at each other and we're asking each other, like, what happened? Like, we were on the roof. How did we get here? We just couldn't understand how one second we're on the roof and the next second we're down on the ground floor, sitting on the steps and so on. And as we're talking, asking each other, how did we get here? We hear our parents outside on the road calling out our names. And, whichever parent was there was calling out their kids' names. And one of the kids, put his head out the door and called out, yeah, we're here. He waved at them. And I said, we're over here. So a couple of parents came in and they were like questioning us, where have you been? And we're like, we're up on the roof playing. And they were like, no, where have you been? And every time we'd say we're on the roof, the child that their parent was there would smack the child on the back of the bum, on the back of the legs and say, stop lying. Where were you? Tell us the truth. And we were up on the roof. And every time someone said we're up on the roof, someone would get a smack. It was okay to smack your neighbor's kids back then. It wasn't illegal. Anyway, so as the parents are talking to us, they said, okay, if you were up on the roof, why didn't you answer when we were calling you? And we said, we didn't hear you call us. We didn't hear anybody call our names. And they said, for the over 2 hours, we've been running around town, calling out, screaming your names. A lot of people are looking for you. Why didn't you? They were so angry that we were on the roof and we didn't reply, or, answer their calls. So they were really upset. So anyway, we were all told to go home. Some of us weren't allowed to play, with each other for a couple of days. Now it's called grounding, let the kids play. So that was that experience. And I just, I was a kid. I didn't know who to talk to or if to tell anyone. My friends didn't mention it. So I just put it in the back of my head and just moved on. It was in the back of my mind. And in 1973, my father was already in Australia for a few years before us. And in 1973, my family migrated out to Australia. And I grew up in an area where it was multicultural, probably one of the best places to grow up, but it was a hard place. It was really tough to grow up there. You had to know the streets and you had to be very, very smart to survive. And it was like I went to primary school. I started school in year 2, and then 2 weeks later they moved me to year 3. So I started school fairly young, where my brothers, 2 elder brothers and my sister, they started late. Well, my sister went to school, my brothers didn't. They started work. So they've got a heavy accent, Lebanese background, heavy accent, speak perfect, proper English, but they do have an accent. And so, yeah, I grew up, went to school, and one day when I finished school, I went and got a job. And one day I was visiting a friend of mine at school, and he was talking to me, and I saw a young lady, a girl playing netball or basketball in the playground. And, there was 1,200 students in there, and I just noticed this one girl. And I asked my friend who she was, and he told me her name. And I said to him, this is honest truth. I said to him, that's exactly what I want my wife to look like. And, I was like 16 years at the time. I said, that's exactly what I want my wife to look like. So the following week, I decided to go to that school and apply. And I ended up going to that school for about 7 or 8 months. And I met her there, and we became really good, best of friends. And then we dated. And after school, she continued on her education to year 12, and I left. And so we went our separate ways for about 7 years. And then she went overseas on holidays. And the day she came back, she called my parents home. She had their phone number from before and asked what I was doing. My mum was only happy to give her my phone number because at the time, I was dating a woman. I was living with her for 4.5 years. She was 11 years older than me. She had 2 children. They were 5 and 7 when I met her. And we stayed together for 4.5 years, but it was a roller coaster ride, you know. Yeah, she was involved in a lot of different things that I didn't grow up involved in. And it was an eye opener. I learned a lot. But you know, you live life and there are things that you might do differently if you had another chance. And that's probably one thing I would do differently. But anyway, in 1988, Vivian and I were dating, and it was 14th of February 1988, so it was Valentine's Day. And we were sitting in my car, and I was in the driver's seat, and I had my back to the door. She was in the passenger seat, and she had her back to the door. So we're looking at each other, and we're talking. We were planning a trip to Queensland, and we were talking about it, and something just said to me, look out the window. I got this message in my mind, in my head, look out the window. So I just tilted my head back like that. I had the window open, and I looked out, and I saw in the sky heading from north to south, I saw this ball. It was bigger than a baseball, but bright white, like ice white, very, very bright white, but it didn't have a haze. It was just very, very solid round light. You could see the edges, like it was so solid. And it was moving very, very quickly across the sky. And then when it got to the Southern Cross, it stopped at the top star of the Southern Cross. It was moving rapidly, and then it just stopped. And I said to her, you've got to come out and see this. So we got out of the car, and as we were looking, we saw this ball of light shoot a beam of light. It was a thick beam of light, a white beam of light, and then it appeared at 2 places at the same time. So it looked like a dumbbell. If you're trained to do exercises, it looked like a dumbbell, 2 balls on either end with the connection. And it disappeared from point A, and then where it was at point B, it shot another beam of light, and it appeared at point C, disappeared at point B. But it was doing this erratically in a triangular formation on 3 points of stars on the Southern Cross. But it was erratic. It was like, it wasn't just one motion like that. It was just bang, bang, back and forth. It was spectacular. Couldn't believe what we were looking at. So I got a bit of cardboard out of my car and rolled it up just to tunnel my vision so I can focus on that point. And my partner at the time said to me, she said, oh, it looks like a war with the stars. And I said to her, no, it looks like it's searching for something. I assumed the beam of light was like a searchlight. But later on, and doing research and so on, I learned it was so quick. It was traveling. You could see it at 2 places at one time and then disappeared from its point of origin, but always appearing at 2 places and disappearing. That's how fast this thing was moving. So, as we're watching it, we're talking about it, and we're saying to each other, oh, tomorrow we've got to check the news. It'll be on radio. It'll be on television. It'll be in the newspapers. We thought it was about 8 o'clock, maybe, 8:30, between 8 and 8:30 at night. We thought there would have been thousands of people in Sydney who would have seen it, or in our area, and we thought there'd be many people who are going to report this. Anyway, all of a sudden, as it's doing these erratic movements, it stopped again where it started at the top star of the Southern Cross. It sat there for a few seconds, and then it shot straight up into the sky. Within 2 seconds, it was gone out of sight. We at the time thought it was better than a firework display on New Year's Eve. It was just spectacular. Anyway, this was February. In July of 1988, so about 6 months later, on the 12th of July, 1988, I had an experience then at my parents' house. Now, I was living on my own for about 4.5, 5 years, and I had just moved back home, and I was at home, but I think I'd say, 7, 8 months, something like that, living at my parents' house again. And I was sitting in the lounge room that night, with my father. I was watching television, and we were watching a movie. The movie started about 11 o'clock at night. It was a late movie, and it was about 10, 15 minutes into this movie. We're sitting down watching it, and I really enjoyed that because I didn't spend much time with my father at all growing up. When I was a child, my father worked overseas, so I'd see him maybe 2 weeks every 6 months. He'd come and visit for 2 weeks and then go back. So I didn't really know my dad. And here I am, in my 20s, and I'm sitting there with my dad, and I loved every minute of it that I was spending some time with him. And we're sitting down watching TV, and my brother, my oldest brother, his name's Sam, he was sleeping in my bedroom. He'd been sleeping there for a while. All of a sudden, he opened the door, walked out, and he said to me, "Can you go and watch TV in your bedroom? I want to sleep out here." I thought it was odd, but I didn't question it. I said, "Yeah, sure, no worries." A bit disappointed I couldn't stay there with my dad, but I went into my bedroom. I went in, I sat down on my bed. I had a coffee table with a little color television, a Toshiba color television sitting there. And I sat on the bed, and as I leaned forward, I pushed the button on the TV, turn it on. And as I went to sit back to lie on my bed, I put my hands like that behind my head. And as I went to lift my legs over and put them on the bed, I crossed my right leg over my left. And before my head even hit the pillow, my hands hadn't even touched the pillow, I felt something grab me like that around my ankles on my right leg. Grabbed me like that, and as soon as it grabbed me, it felt to me it could have been the index finger and the thumb, like that area, but then it could have been a device, because as soon as I felt it touch me, I started feeling pins and needles, like numbness crawling up. It was almost like electricity crawling up through my legs, up through my body, and I could feel the whole body like, staticky and numb at the same time. And then as it reached my face, my whole face went numb, and it reached the top of my head, and it felt like, the way I described it back then, was like thousands of ants crawling through my scalp, and felt like static electricity just rushing through me, but paralyzed me. I became paralyzed. I couldn't move. I was just lying like that, and I couldn't move. And my eyes were open. Now, I believe if my eyes were closed, if I had laid down and closed my eyes to sleep, I would have thought this was a dream, would never have spoken about this, would never have gone public. I would have just thought, okay, it's a dream, move on. But I had my eyes open. I hadn't fallen asleep. I had just laid back. My eyes were open. I look at the foot of the bed, and I can see a creature, a little being, about 3 to 4 foot in height. It was wearing a robe, like a monk's robe, with a hood over its head, which the hood made the head look even bigger. It was a dark hood and, a dark robe, but the face was what caught my attention. This thing was stocky. It was robust. It was like looking at a gorilla standing at the foot of your bed, wearing a robe, a black robe with a hood on. It had really deep, wide forehead, deep wrinkles, very deep wrinkles. It had high-bridged eyebrows, very high, like wide and sticking out, real round eyes. The eyes were round and deeply set in. It had a wide nose, very wide nose, and the lips were big lips. The face was it was a wide face. The mouth looked big, solid chin, very, very robust looking. And if anybody knows, which later on, years later, I came across this, but I'll describe the other beings, and then I'll get into this where you can have a look at an image and see exactly what they look like. But as I'm looking at the being at the foot of the bed, I noticed movement on my right side with the corner of my eye. So I looked, and I see 2 more exactly the same as that being, the creature, the small, they were gorilla looking creatures, and they looked very, very strong. And at the time I thought, oh my God, this is evil. These things are demonic. They're here to take me, and that's it. I'm done. And as I'm freaking out, I'm sweating. I'm trying to move. Now, I'm claustrophobic best of time. I don't like lifts. I don't like being, restrained, or It affects me. And as soon as I couldn't move and I couldn't, get out of bed or do what I want, it stressed me out. So I was sweating, I was like freaking out a little bit, thinking it's evil and so on. And I wanted to fight. I wanted to get up. Like I had trained in, different martial arts at the time, played sports. And I just wanted to get up and, kick and punch and get out of this and try, but I couldn't do anything. They were in total control. And as I was completely freaking out, like so concerned that this could be the, last day of my life, I noticed on my left side, and there's a wardrobe, there's a gap, and then there's the bed. So they were very close to me. I noticed two beings that were tall, very slender, very thin, goldish in color. They could have been wearing a suit, but it was an all over their face, and their whole body was the same color. As I noticed them with the corner of my eye, like I'm looking to this side of the bed now, I noticed two of them. The one closest to me, to my shoulder and my head, was male, and he had big, massive, large eyes, like bigger than a horse's eye or a cow's eye, massive black eyes. He had didn't have a breech for a nose like us, but two nostrils sticking out, and they were like, good sized nostrils, but narrow, very narrow. For the mouth, I didn't see any lips. I didn't see an upper and lower lip or teeth or anything. It was just a line. If you got a pencil and just drew a line, that was it. And it came, the shape of the head, it sort of came where the ears would be or whatever. It came to a bit of a point, then kicked in a bit, and then down to a chin. I noticed next to that was a female, and she was about around my waist, my side. And she was standing there. Now the male had a surgical mask on, and through COVID, we all know our surgical masks are probably, that wide and cover your nose and mouth. This mask that the being was wearing was about 2 fingers wide, and he didn't have it over his mouth. He had it sitting down here under his chin. The female, there was a female next to him, and looked almost identical, slight differences. And obviously, she had bigger chest. And she was wearing a surgical mask, but over her mouth, it was sitting over her mouth. And that's when I really noticed that it was only, so 2 fingers wide. And I'm freaking out 1 second, and then I see these beings. And as I looked straight into his black eyes. And it was like, as soon as I looked in his eye, and I looked in his right eye first, it was as if I fell into like a dark space, a void. It was like calming. Instantly, as soon as I looked, I felt calm. I became calm. 1 second, I was sweating. I was trying to fight, and then total calmness. And then this telepathic communication. And I keep trying to explain this to people. It's not voices in my head. I'm not hearing someone talk to me and tell me, go do this, go do that. It's not. It's a feeling. It's like you thinking, and I can pick up on what you're thinking. I'm not hearing your voice. I'm hearing your thought. I'm receiving a thought. Rather, it's more a feeling, a knowing, rather than voices. So I can pick up on what he's saying. And he says to me, calm down, relax, calm down. It'll be like the last time. Calm down, relax. We're not going to harm you. Calm down. Repeatedly said that. And when he said it'll be like the last time, it freaked me out. I was like, what last time? I got no memory of a last time. And he repeated that as he repeated other things. He repeated it a couple of times. And I became really, really calm, completely calm. And as he calmed me down, I see in his hand, and it was like he was grabbing it with 3 fingers like that. I didn't see like a thumb, but it was like that. And it was like a syringe, a tube. And then it had like an optic fiber, a very thin needle looking thing. And at the end of that needle was a little light, a tiny, tiny little light. And he brought it down and pointed it to my head here. And I felt a little bit of pressure. Although that needle was flexible, I felt the pressure, felt it go in, but I didn't feel any pain. There was no pain, and I blacked out, total blackout. When I woke up, I remember, because I've been trying to move and fight this paralysis, When I woke up, when I came to again, I sprung out of bed. I jumped out of bed so quickly. I opened my bedroom door, went into the television room. My father was still there. My brother was still there, but they were sleeping. They were out. So I went to wake up my dad, tried to wake up my brother, couldn't wake him. So I went back, tried to wake up my dad again, and I couldn't wake him. So I got a bit scared. I thought my dad had a heart attack. He might have died. So I went to my brother and tried to wake him, and I couldn't. So I slapped him across the face. I hit him 2-3 times, and he came to, opened his eyes. And the first thing that came out of his mouth, he said it in Lebanese, in Arabic. He said, "I feel like I've been switched off." And it didn't make sense at the time. I didn't know this happens to a lot of people. Learned that later on. But anyway, I said to him, "I can't wake up Dad. Something's wrong with him." So we both got up, tried to wake up Dad. My brother said, "Go get a glass of water." Splashed it on my dad's face, didn't wake up. And then my brother slapped him 2 or 3 times pretty hard. And my dad woke up. He didn't ask us. He didn't say, "Why are you hitting me? Why are you putting water on me? Did I have a heart attack? Did I have a stroke?" Nothing. He just looked at us and went back, just laid down and fell asleep again. Now, I said to my brother at the time, like, they should have been watching a movie, because I thought it was about 10-15 minutes since I blacked out and then woke up again. So I asked my brother, I said, "How long do you think it's been since we swapped? Like, you came out here and I went to the room." He goes, "Oh, about 10-15 minutes. And that's what I thought. So as my brother and I are talking, we look at the TV screen, and the television station had closed. It was just a closed station. He used to have a test pattern, with a song about City of Sydney and so on. And now over 2.5 hours, or 2.5 hours at least, had to have gone by. So what I did, which was a bit, I don't know, that was my way of justifying things. I went and got a glass of water, and I went into my bedroom. I put it next to my bed, and I thought, if I wake up in the morning and that glass of water's there, something happened. So, usually I'll have a dream, I'll have a dream, and I'll get up, and it'll take me hours to get back to sleep, because this dream is going through my mind. Sometimes it's scary, dreams are crazy. And this time I didn't even think about it. I didn't go to bed and go, "Oh, what just happened? These beings in my room." No, I just went back to bed and fell asleep straight away. Now, I got up in the morning and I went and had a shower. And as I was drying myself, I went to dry my right leg on my shin. And I noticed a burn mark. It was like someone had a cigarette and put it on my shin, on my skin, and let it burn. And it was round, about 5 millimeters round. It was about, 2-3 millimeters deep, and it was red raw. It was like a cigarette burn. Anyway, I knew straight away, as soon as I touched it and it burnt me, and I looked at it and noticed how raw it was, I knew it was from the night before. I connected it. I thought, this must have happened last night. So anyway, 6 hours later, I went to pick up my partner from work. And as soon as she got in the car, she looked at me and she saw my face, straight away said, "Have you had a fight with someone? What's wrong? What happened?" And I said, "Look, something happened to me last night. I need to speak to someone. I may as well tell you." So as we're driving, I'm telling her the story, and I went, "Yeah," and they put something in my head here. And as I touched this part of my head, under my fingernail, there was dry blood. And when she saw the dry blood, she's like, "Give me a look." So she had a look, and she's like, "Oh my God, you've got like a donut hole in your head, and it's raised. It looks inflamed, and there's blood on the inside of it. There's dry blood, And I said, "Yeah." And I went to show her my leg. So I lifted my pants leg up over my shin to show her, and it was healed, but didn't heal and disappear like it's gone. It's a scar. You can see it. It's 6 hours later, from being red raw, it was now healed. The skin was healed. It wasn't red anymore, but it's still there, about a 5 centimeter diameter. It's deep, and it looks like it's got 3 like prongs in there, like 3 points. I learned later that, these are called spook marks, and they do that to you because they can get skin, hair, blood, whatever. It's a good place to get a sample, I guess. Anyway, I by the time Vivian and I got home, she said, look, you better go and see your doctor. So I went up the road. It was only 5 minutes from her place. I went and seen my doctor. She had been my doctor for about 10 years and she knew me very well. I walked in and spoke to her and I told her exactly what I had just told you. And she just cracked up laughing and, you know, she thought it was the funniest thing. And she said, look, Peter, you hit your head on a nail at work. You know, I've stepped on a nail at work before and gone to her and she's given me a tetanus shot and I go home. I don't make up a story like this. So anyway, I was very disappointed in her. I never went back to see her again because I thought, don't laugh at me. You know, refer me to a psychologist or a psychiatrist or someone to speak to. Don't just laugh at me and say to me, you hit your head on the nail at work. So it was a shame I never went back to see her again. So leading from that, I started getting, you know, I wanted to know. I went on a search. I went on a search for truth. I wanted to know what was happening to me. So the first book I ever bought just happened by chance. I was driving, doing the delivery, and I had my lunch break, and I was sitting in a car parked in the car, and I heard a radio interview with a guy called Brian Bury interviewing a guy called Whitley Strieber. I never heard of Whitley Strieber before, and for 45 minutes I sat there and I heard this guy tell a story that sounded so similar to mine, and his description of the beings, like the short ones, you know, with the robe, and the gorilla looking ones, and the taller ones, the yellow ones with the big eyes. He described them exactly what I saw. And I thought, oh my God, I'm not the only one in the world that's experienced this. Someone else has. Anyway, listen to this interview. I was fascinated by it. A lot of things I couldn't relate to. It was different, very different to me. But there were some things that, yeah, I could say tick, tick, that happened to me. Anyway, later on, we're driving, we're in the car driving, and we see a poster, a big poster, an advertisement in a bus shelter. And it was a black poster painted, or the black color with the writing, they're coming. They are coming, or they're coming. And 2 weeks later, similar poster, black, with more writing, another, not the same writing, and it said, they're here. We didn't know what it was about. 2 weeks after that, there was a big poster, and it had the big aliens, the goldish color ones with the big eyes, the cover of the book Communion. It was right there in my face. As the bus drove off, we look and we see it. We were both shocked. She was with me in the car. My partner was in the car. And we were both absolutely shocked. And first thing she said was, oh my God, that's what you saw. She goes, that's exactly what you told me you saw. So we started asking questions, and it was a advertisement for, I think, the real release of a second edition of the book Communion by Whitley Strieber. So we ordered it. We got the book. I ordered it, actually. And Vivian started reading it before I did. Now, I've got a photo of her walking into my parents' front yard through the gate. And I went to take a photo because she was holding the book, and she put the book to her face. So that image of that alien is right at her face. So anyway, she started reading the book before I did, and she'd read it on the way to work on the train. She'd get to work. She'd call me straight away, and she'd say to me, Peter, you've spoken to someone. I don't know if it's your doctor. I don't know if it's someone else. You've spoken to someone. This is your story. Someone's written your story. And I was like, but I only told you and my doctor, no one else. Anyway, every time she'd read the book, she'd call me and just, you know, point out how many similarities or whatever. She was really intrigued. And then about a couple of weeks later, she gave me the book to read, and I picked up the book, looked at the cover, and I was like, okay, that's what I saw. I start to read. I read a couple of lines on the first page. I couldn't read anymore. I just couldn't do it. It just stressed me out. Had so much anxiety. So I put the book down. You know, a couple of days later, I'd pick up the book. I'd read, you know, one paragraph, two paragraphs, and I'd put the book down. And that happened for probably, I'd say, a month, where I'd read, you know, half a page, maybe a page, and I'd put it down. And then I just thought, no, I've got to commit to this. I've got to read this. So I started to sit there and read it, and it was stressful to do so. But I found that there were a lot of things that I just didn't relate to, where he's in his cabin, these aliens appear and disappear in the cabin inside. He shoots at them with a shotgun. I don't know if that was in dream state or it really happened, because there'd be damage inside the cabin from the gunshots. But I didn't experience any of that. They had full control. I couldn't do anything. They controlled the whole situation where I was concerned. So yeah, it came as a big shock to me to realize that other people in the world are experiencing this. When I was reading the book, I saw the image of the smaller ones. And I got to say, if someone said to me, Peter, we want you to give us a description, what did they look like? I don't think I could have given a better description than the ones you get in communion. It's just perfect what they look like. That's exactly what they look like. So that started a whole search for me where I wanted to read every UFO book. Every UFO book that was out there, I wanted to read. And you can see behind me, I've got a big collection of books. I've read probably 90% of them. And to me, it was like, once I realized what it was, I wanted to know what was going on. Like, why me? Why is it happening to me? And why is it happening to some other people and not to everyone, you know? So I went on a search and I contacted a few psychiatrists and psychologists to talk to. And they'd all, as soon as I'd say, oh, there were beings in my room, you know, they'd hang up. They'd just go, no, we don't do this, hang up. There was one gentleman, a psychologist in Queensland, and I spoke to him for a while, and he said to me, look, I've heard a lot of people talking about similar stuff, experiences that you're telling me. He said, I think it's UFO, alien related. There's a group in Sydney forming, you know, get involved, ask them questions, you know, you might learn a bit more from them. So I attended, myself and two female friends of mine attended the first meeting, and we ended up winning a competition to name the group. And so I got involved in the group, and in a very short time, I was trying to understand what was happening to me. I didn't know what was happening to me. I wanted to know what was going on. So within a very short amount of time, a lot of people started coming to meetings and saying, oh, look, I've had an experience. I think I've been abducted. You know, I've had alien abductions. So the group didn't want to do anything with abductions. They were happy to report on lights in the sky and, you know, distant objects and objects. Someone saw an object in the 1960s. I wanted to talk about that. They didn't want to touch the alien abduction stuff. They thought it was more mental health than anything else. So they said at one meeting, they just out of the blue, they said, oh, Peter Khoury will be the support group coordinator. Send all information or touch base with him, speak to him. He'll give you a number. And I was like, no, I can't do this. I don't know what's happening to me. I can't help anyone else. But at the same time, I thought, you know what? If anyone can do something like this, I probably can. Because I'm determined. If I believe in a cause, I'll act on it. I'll do everything I can, you know, because I believe in it. So I started taking a lot of people on board, and before I knew it, it started to get bigger than the sightings side of the UFO field. You know, it just started. A lot of people were reporting having these experiences. So anyway, it wasn't until Bud Hopkins, who was a pioneer in the alien abduction research, came to Australia, held a conference. I had the opportunity to interview him with a friend before the conference on the day. And it gave us some really good feedback. And after that meeting, after that conference, that group that I was involved in wanted to take the whole support group network, like everything I was doing, away from me. It wasn't a support group at the time, sorry. It was just a network. And I decided, no, I'll go out on my own, start my own group. So in April of 1993, I founded the UFO Experience Support Association, and it's UFOSA, which is a non-profit organization. We were just dedicated just to help people and help people understand what's going on with them. Fortunately, we had a lot of professional support, you know, doctors, hypnotherapists, counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists. You know, even Professor Mack John Mack did a workshop with us and worked closely with me on my case as well. And we became really good friends. John Mack became like a father figure to me. Him and his partner, when they were in Australia, they'd spend a lot of time with me and my family. His death crushed me. It was, you know, so sad to lose him in the way we did. May he rest in peace. So when I founded the group, when I started the support group, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And, you know, we started holding conferences. We started holding film nights and support group meetings and workshops. And for about 15 years there, from, I'd say, 1993, you know, 15 years down the track, we were doing a lot of good work in the UFO field. And I look back at a lot of researchers now and the hard work they did, you know, for a lot of years, a lot of decades that have gone by. And it seems like a lot of people don't take notice of them anymore. You know, they were the pioneers, the founders of this field, and they were the ones who faced more scrutiny than anyone. Like now it's popular to be a UFO researcher. It's popular to talk about this. When you go back 30, 40 years, you were shunned. You know, people thought you were crazy. They didn't want to, even if you were investigating it, you didn't have the experience. They just looked at you as being crazy. But now it's a popular topic. And, so that was my 88 experience and introduction to the UFO field, which was a roller coaster ride, you know, very disappointing at times because of the politics involved in ufology. We should be working for one cause, and that's to, you know, put the best stories out there so people can, you know, understand what's going on. Coming up to, I got married in 1990. So my partner and I had bought a house in 1988. We ended up moving in 1990 when we got married. The first night that we spent in the house together, the house was empty. We had no furniture. We hadn't moved in. The next day we were going to start renovating, doing some painting and so on. We were sitting in the lounge room and had a milk crate on the floor with that same color Toshiba TV, sitting on that box with a couple of pizzas. And, you know, we're sitting on the floor having something to eat. And we heard massive footsteps, like heavy footsteps walk through the house. And talking about footsteps, something I missed in 1988 experience at my parents' house. For 2 weeks before that, we'd hear like soldiers, like a number of people, men, marching with heavy boots down my parents' driveway. That's for 2 weeks every night. And my brothers, who lived in the 2 front rooms, would walk out and look, but never see anyone. And there were 2 walls. I think I've sent you a picture of the house. If you have a look at it, you'll see there's a driveway, there's a garage blocking. You can't go anywhere. You can't run and hide. If you're in there, you're trapped in there. One way in, one way out. So we'd hear that on a daily basis. And so anyway, we're sitting 1990, we're sitting in the lounge room and we hear these footsteps, and as they got closer to us, they were sounding a lot louder. And there was an archway leading to another room. And as soon as it got to a spot where it would have seen us, so we're looking up expecting to see a person, someone. And we didn't see anyone, but we heard the steps, and it was right there, about 3 meters away from us, and it stopped. It was as if when it saw us, it stopped, and didn't hear it walk away, didn't hear anything, just disappeared. But that was the first experience we had here together where something happened in this house, and it was on the first night that we were here. So we moved in. After a couple of weeks, we're here. She was cooking something, and she asked me to go to the shop and get some ingredients that she needed. 2 minutes after I left, she heard footsteps walking through the house, and she thought to herself, Peter must have forgot his wallet. He's come back to grab his wallet. You know, it's nothing. And she hears the footsteps come in. She turns around. She's in the kitchen. She turns around and she sees what she described. A man that looked like Abraham Lincoln with a top hat, a long beard, wearing a dark suit with a tailcoat, like a long tailcoat to the jacket. And she said it walked across the archway and looked towards her and then walked straight into a wall that had mirrors. It was a mirrored wall. And I got back about 15 minutes later. And when I walked through the door, I walked into the house and my partner had her hands clenched, like locked onto the kitchen bench, and she was shaking. She was shaking, so scared. I said, what's the matter? And she said, Peter, there's a man. She actually swore, there's an effing man in the house. There's a man walking in our house. So I went and searched the whole house, looked everywhere, didn't find anything. And that was 2 weeks in. So gradually over time, we'd hear a lot of things happening in this house we couldn't explain. So 1992, 23rd of July, 1992, I got out of bed about, I'd say, 5 to 7 in the morning, got out of bed, jumped in the car, went to drive my partner to the station, to the railway station. As we're driving there, I went about 2 streets away from my house and I started getting really sick. I started to have to stop the car, open the door, and actually vomit. And it was like a yellow and green color. I couldn't understand what that was. It wasn't food, like a food poisoning thing. It was just this liquid coming out of me. And the further I got from home and closer to the railway station where I had to drop my partner off, I'd have to pull up more regularly, stop the car, open the door. Every like 15, 20 meters, I'd stop, open the door, and just get sick. So dropped her off. On the way back, same thing. I'd stop, get sick, stop, get sick. As I got closer to home, about 2 streets away from my house, I noticed I stopped being sick. I didn't have to stop and vomit anymore. So I got into my driveway, pulled up, walked in, not getting sick, not vomiting anymore at all. Opened my door, walked into my house. I closed the door behind me. And because I had been vomiting and it was a different, like liquid color, I just felt oozy. So I thought, oh, look, I'll go lie down in bed. Went and lied down in bed and put the quilt over me. It was July 1992. So it was, cold. It's winter. I put the quilt over me and I laid down. And it would have been a couple of minutes. It wouldn't have been more than, less than 5 minutes. I felt something jump on the bed, like someone sat on the bed, but in the middle of the bed, like the mattress. I felt an indentation in the mattress. And it caught my attention straight away because we didn't have any dogs or cats. We didn't have pets at the time. We just moved, And it caught my attention. So as I'm lying there, I went to sit up. To see what's on my bed. And as I did that, I saw my astral body, my soul, whatever you want to call it, whatever people want to label it. I saw my astral body come out of me, and it was like in stages. It was like bang, 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 like that. And it sat up. And as I was sitting up, I could see a transparent image of me, like a glass image of me. And through that, on the other side of that, I could see a blonde female, tall blonde female, completely naked, milky white skin in color, not a blemish. I didn't see a dot, a beauty spot, a birthmark, nothing, no blemishes on her whatsoever. Big blue eyes, really beautiful, vibrant blue eyes. And she had a long nose. It wasn't like a big high nose. It was like low, but it was longer. And nostrils weren't too big either, but it was a longer nose. She had beautiful lips, and then her face, the cheeks protruded out. I compare her to the singer Cher. She's got that longer face. She's got the protruding cheekbones. Then her face narrowed in at the cheeks, and then down to the chin, it narrowed a bit. And I don't mean narrow like a pointy chin like a witch. It just narrowed down, it wasn't a wide chin. And as I'm looking at that and I'm shocked, I see my body and my soul become one again. I was again, one entity, like became one. And as that happened, as I saw the last image of me and I joined together, we became one. She grabbed my head like that, cupped the back of my head with both her hands and brought me to her left chest and pushed my face into her chest. And as I said before, I'm claustrophobic. Like as soon as she did it, at first I was able to push away. She did it a second time and held me there a bit longer, but I was still able to put my hands against her body and push away from her. The third time, she buried my face in her chest and held me really tight that my nose and my mouth were covered by her breast. I couldn't breathe. And I was trying to breathe and I couldn't. And I got anxious. So I'm trying to push away from her, and I was using a lot of my, energy. I couldn't do it. And she was stronger than me, and she held me there. I couldn't understand that. But anyway, as I'm trying to push away, I couldn't. So I'm, having problems breathing. So people say, oh, he took a bite. No, I didn't take a bite. It's like a pinch. It's like if you pinch someone, just with my teeth, I just pinched on her skin. and I was able to push. It was like it shocked her, and I was able to push away. And as I looked at her, I saw her face, her eyes became so much bigger. It was like she was in shock, and her eyes just widened. And I could see that where I took that nip, I didn't see a mark. I didn't see any bleeding. I didn't see a cut or anything, not even a red mark. But as soon as I bit whatever, I felt it coming, in my mouth and hit the back of my throat. And as soon as it got to the back of my throat, it felt like I drank acid, It felt like someone just poured acid down my throat, and it was burning me, really, really badly burning me. And I started coughing. And as I'm getting this coughing, I see the blonde girl, the blonde female. Now, there was another female on the bed, which I should have mentioned earlier. She was on the side of the bed, kneeling down on the bed, kneeling on the back of her calves. And at first she had her hands around her ankles, and then she had them like you do in the school photographs on her knees, like hands like that and on her knees. And it looked like she was just monitoring or learning. That's the impression I got. And she looked Asian. She was darker, her skin was darker. She had a straight cut boy bob haircut, whatever they call it. Hair's just down to her shoulders, straight black hair. Normal Asian features, except in the eyes, it was a lot of pupils were black. I could hardly see any white in there. And she was just like monitoring what's going on. But then the blonde looked at her, they looked at each other, and they started communicating with each other telepathically. They weren't talking. There was no words. I couldn't see their mouth talking or anything. But I picked up on it again. It was like that feeling, that knowing. And she was saying to her, something's gone wrong. This has gone wrong. He's done something wrong. This isn't like the last time. Something's gone wrong. And it was a concern, but it was like quick, rapid communication. And I'm sitting there again thinking, when she said he's done this wrong, this isn't like the last time he's done this wrong. And I'm once again, here we are, and I'm saying, I've never seen you before. What last time, It was freaking me out just to think that she was saying like the last time, as if it's happened before. I've had other memories under hypnotherapy in that of all this stuff, but I don't talk about them much. I'd just rather stick to my conscious recall. What I'm telling you now, all the stories I'm telling you, I remember consciously, like I'm talking to you right now. These memories weren't retrieved through hypnotherapy. So whatever I get through hypnotherapy, I have it there, but I don't use it. I don't, go out and say, oh, this happened to me. And it's something that I a recollection from a hypnotherapy session, whether it was with Professor John Mack or someone else. But I don't want to use that as the evidence for it, so to speak. I like to stick to my conscious recall and the physical evidence that comes with it. So anyway, as they're communicating, and I'm picking up a lot of telepathic communication to me, like targeted at me. And all of a sudden I start coughing. I look down, and as I look down, I'm coughing. I look up, and they're gone. They vanished. They weren't in my room anymore. Just as quickly as they came into my room, they vanished. I didn't see them leave. I just put my head down to cough. I looked up, they were gone. So I got a burning thing in my throat, and I'm coughing, and this coughing lasted for 3 days. And when I'd start coughing, I'd cough for 15, 20 minutes, and my organs, I was in so much pain internally, and the muscles and that, because coughing all the time, you can ache from it. So for 3 days, I'd have these coughing fits, which were annoying. But anyway, I got out of bed, and I went into the kitchen, and I went and got some Lebanese bread and ate some Lebanese bread, thinking, whatever's in there, the bread will wash it down, take it down. And it didn't work. So I went and got a bit of water, and I drank some water. And as soon as the water hit the back of my throat, it was like you added petrol onto a fire, and it just, started burning even worse. I had a bad coughing fit. Once I sort of slowed down coughing, I had the urge to use the bathroom. I had to go and do a pee in the toilet, in the bathroom. I walked in there, and as any man would know, when you go to pee, you get built up, then you release. And I'm sorry I have to describe it that way, but it's what happened to me, and I'm not going to, choose what sort of to cut in and out. But anyway, as soon as I felt I was going to pee, it felt like my penis had been slashed with razors, like really, really painful. To me, it felt like I had been slashed everywhere. And when I had a look, I could see that there were two hairs, two blonde, like see-through hairs. It was like a fishing line, like a nylon fishing line, very, very thin, transparent. I could see through it, but one was sort of half wrapped around and the other one was in an S shape on the shaft. And they were embedded into my private area. You know, it wasn't just sitting there and I could just take them off. These things were embedded. If you put your fingernail in your skin and push it, you get that indentation. That's what I had. And when I started to peel them off, it was the most excruciating pain. I had tears running down my eyes. I was crying when I was moving these two hairs, taking off. It was so painful. But anyway, I ended up retrieving the two hairs. One was longer than the other. I didn't know at the time that one of the hairs had the root and the shaft. It was a complete hair. The other one was half a hair, like broken. I didn't know that. So anyway, instantly in my mind, I thought, this is all connected. This thing in my throat, the hair on my private area. So I went and got a bag. I put him in a bag. I sealed it. I put a note on it, you know, like the date, blonde female, Asian female, 2 hair samples. And I put it away and I kept it. I wasn't expecting anything. I just thought, this is my evidence for me. You know, I'm not here to show the world. I'm not going to go and show the world something that was on my private area and so on. But anyway, I kept that story to myself for a lot of years. And I spoke to Professor John Mack about it in 1996 and 97. He regressed me, did a regression with me, and we did a bit of work. But anyway, in 1996, I believe, Bill Chalker, he's the author of the book Hair of the Alien, about my story. He's written the book, The Oz Files, as well. He's a UFO researcher, very good UFO researcher, scientific background. And anyway, Bill was over at my house and we were discussing a documentary with 2 film producers, females. And they said, as we're talking, you know, they said to us, oh, look, if this is really happening to people, if it's a real event, it's physical, there should be some evidence left behind. Like, you know, in cases of SA, there's evidence, you know, there's like sample, sperm sample, hair sample, skin sample, whatever. There's always some sort of evidence left behind, mostly. Anyway, as they're talking, they were a bit condescending the way they came across, like rubbing it in our face. You've got no evidence, you know. So I just jumped up and I said, you want evidence? I'll show you evidence. I went and grabbed that bag, brought it out, showed them. Now, Bill Chalker has a scientific background. He's a researcher. He was a friend of mine. My 1988 case is in his book, The Oz Files. He's listed it in there, mentioned it in there. And so we knew each other well. And I didn't talk to him about this case. I didn't go to him and say, look, I've got these hair samples. This is what happened. I kept it to myself more so. And anyway, Bill asked me, you know, he said, why didn't you tell me about this? And I remember saying, I said, Bill, my 1988 case is a can of worms, hard for people to believe. This is something just way, way different. You know, it's harder to believe than anything. I said, but it happened to me. Anyway, he kept it in the back of his mind. And then in 1998, he contacted me and he told me that he was working with what they called an invisible college of scientists and interested parties who were willing to test, you know, alien UFO related evidence. And would I be interested? I think it was APEG, Anomaly Physical Evidence Group. And he asked me if I'd be interested to get the hairs tested. And I, without hesitation, without even a thought, without telling him, you know, I'll discuss it with my partner or whatever, I just said, yep, let's start, let's do it. And they came and took the samples and started doing some testing. Luckily there was some funding. Someone funded Bill Chalker and the research to get the DNA testing done, which was great. Once they did the original test, the first phase of the testing, Bill Chalker wrote an article for International UFO Reporter, the IUR, and it caught a lot of attention. And then they did a second phase of the testing, which is the nuclear DNA testing, and then what they found results that were just shouldn't been. It should have been normal hair. It should have come across as normal. Anybody in Australia or anybody around the world has a similar hair. It's nothing, no biggie or anything. And so they came to my place and took a hair sample off me, took a hair sample of Vivian, my ex, and tested those to see if that was the hair, and it was nothing like it. So anyway, I'll explain just briefly. I'm not a DNA expert. I've only, learnt this through my case, and I comment on that. But anybody who wants to know the full description of the testing procedures, the results, go to grab a copy of, or you can get it online, the Hair of the Alien by Bill Chalker. It describes it all in there in detail. So basically what they found was in the root of the hair, they found blonde, Basque, Gaelic, blue-eyed, tall DNA. And that's what I mentioned. I mentioned, a fair-skinned, blonde, whitish hair person with blue eyes, tall. Then in the shaft of the hair, it's in the same hair, which should have had similar DNA, if not exactly the same. They found the rarest Chinese mitochondrial DNA, and they were using the PCR method, which is the polymerase chain reaction, discovered by Dr. Terry Malloss, who he's a Nobel Peace Prize, and he himself has had his own experiences, which is very interesting. But okay, so they found the rare Chinese mitochondrial DNA, which is one of the rarest lineages on this planet. And further testing, they found a CCR5 gene deletion, not one but two deletions. And if you have that deletion, you're basically less likely to catch sexually transmitted diseases, or chicken pox or AIDS or whatever. So these people had an immunity to all that. Now, in 1993, I had a panel of people, experts, researchers, psychologists, sit down at a table, and I sat on a chair by myself in the, opposite them, and they were questioning me, asking me all these questions and making notes. And I remember saying to them back then, whoever made these beings, these females, made them for a reason. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, first of all, I think they're made to create, to produce, babies, whatever. I said, but I didn't see a belly button on the blonde female. When I looked at her, I didn't see her belly button. Now, whether she had a really tiny belly button or not, I don't know, but I did not see one. So during my 1992 experience, at one stage, after they telepathically communicated, the blonde female just rubs her stomach slightly, not even rubs it, just sort of touches it. And then she puts points like that. I didn't know what it meant at the time. I didn't know it was a message or what. It didn't even hardly registered with me. It was just that emotion she did. Maybe we're leaving, I'm leaving, whatever. I don't know. But so when I was talking to these people questioning me, I mentioned, there was a blonde, there was an Asian, they're made for a reason. I think they, whoever made them to produce. And here we are some years later, and the test results seem to back up my description of what I saw. There was a blonde female, there was an Asian. So the case gained a lot of interest. It started to get a lot of attention. And I've had a lot of, people say it happened that night, like this experience in 92 happened that night. It was sleep paralysis. It was a dream. It happened at 7:10, 7:15 in the morning. So I was awake. I left home. I went to the station, drove my car back home, laid in my bed. I was awake. It wasn't like I was sleeping, having hypnotic sleep or trance or whatever. I was awake. Also, with the hair, as one of the scientists said, on Ancient Aliens documentary, he said, this hair Peter couldn't have found on the street in Sydney or had someone come to. A lot of people accuse me of hiring prostitutes. Sorry to say that, but They accuse me of hiring hookers to come to my house at 7 a.m. after I've been vomiting. You know, for 20 minutes, I've been vomiting to the station, and on the way back home, I'm vomiting, and I come home and the first thing I want to do is call hookers. I mean, who does that? You know, some of the explanations to try and explain away my story are just so outlandish and stupid. I've got to laugh, but it is upsetting at times because I have a family, I have children, I have 2 grown-up children, and I don't want to hear my kids, you know, someone comment saying, oh, he had hookers at his home at 7 o'clock in the morning, which is ridiculous. But anyway, you know, people want to analyze it and think about it in their belief systems. I understand that. And I understand if people don't believe me, but at the same time, I don't care, because the only people I'm trying to connect with are the people that have had similar experiences to me, but have nowhere to turn. That's why I started this support group in the first place. People have experiences. They don't know who to call. They don't. Now we're blessed because anywhere around the world now you have an experience. You can get on the internet and you can share it with everyone around the world. You can get a lot of assistance, a lot of help. Where before, you know, 30, 40 years ago, you were on your own. You were ridiculed. You were laughed at. Even through my work in security, you know, I've lost opportunities for promotions and stuff because of my belief system in UFOs and aliens. And I know that, and I've been told that. But, you know, to me, it's neither here nor there, because when I believe in something, I want to talk about it. And so when people hear that someone's had more than one experience, they start to think, oh, this is all bull. But I think if you've had one experience, it's probably a dream, or because whoever has these experiences, it's not one-off. It's usually through family generations, through the family. It's ongoing. And it's like humans, when we go to, you know, look, to conserve, say, animals and to save a species, you know, we'll go there, we'll put them to sleep for a few minutes, you know, we'll dart them and put them to sleep with a tranquilizer. We'll put a monitoring device on them, you know, so we can follow them for a few years and see where they go. We study their family group, you know, we study, like lions, for example, we'll study the cubs, study the future of these cubs and their cubs and so on. It's an ongoing process. It's not like a one-off thing and that's it, get this guy, mark him, see you later, go. No. There's a lot of work that goes into this over many, many years, and I accept that. I know that it could happen to me anytime. It doesn't scare me. I've had a number of experiences. I haven't been psychologically, like mentally, sometimes, yeah, it does play. You know, you got to think about that. But physically, or from a point of, is it hurting me? No. If anything, it changed my life for the better, because I was going down a bad track there for a while when I was living with the older woman, and I had this experience and it changed my life, and it changed it for the better, and I'm blessed for it. And if I had an experience tonight or tomorrow, I'll talk about it. I wouldn't be concerned or scared, you know. And that's how my attitude has been about this all the time. I want to reach the people who have had experiences similar to mine, and now they can contact me or contact other people like you, podcasts, whatever, and speak their, you know, tell their story. I was only communicating with someone over the last 2 days, and yesterday I said to him, tell your story. Like, he's doing a podcast soon. He's traveling to Sedona for the conference. And, you know, I said, start telling your story. And he's an ex-pilot with a great story to tell. He's got some photographic evidence as well. You know, people have been scared. He'd been threatened anyway that he'd lose his job and all this stuff in the past. And now he's reaching retirement. He doesn't care anymore. And he said to me, I heard your story and you gave me the courage to contact you and to speak about this. And that's all I've had lately. The last couple of years, I've had a lot of people contact me and say, you give me the courage to speak up. Thank you for sharing your story. It's all positive. Like, out of 100, say, comments, there might be 2 or 3 negative ones. And the negative ones are usually just dumbed out, stupid comments. Someone not even looking at the case, not looking at the evidence, just looking at someone else's comment that commented before them and just go, yeah, the guy's crazy, you know, he had hookers at his house. Like, they're just a waste of time. But I've achieved my goal in that I've reached many people who would not have spoken about their story had they not heard mine. And I'm blessed to have accomplished that, you know. I think a lot of people out there appreciate people talking about their stories and sharing them. And the more that do that, we may not need disclosure. We don't need the government to tell us this is real. We all know it's real. You know, anybody who's been through this experience will know it's real. I don't need the American government. And let's face it, there's many governments, including the French government. They've gone public and you know, acknowledged that UFOs exist, and they've released footage of UFOs being chased and so on. There's been many governments that have done that, but it seems that we need the American government to, you know, tell us all the truth, which I find very hard. And apparently, since President Trump announced that they'll be releasing some UFO files, I heard that thousands and thousands of files got deleted the next night, the next day or something, and they're lost forever, apparently. The game that's been played now with disclosure, I had Stephen Bassett, who's a spokesperson for disclosure, at my house for 3 days, and he lectured to 50 people. It was by invite only. It was other researchers and so on. And I remember Stephen Bassett back then, it was early 2000s, and I remember him saying, within 12 months, without a doubt, we're going to know the truth within 12 months. And I remember putting my hand up and just saying, this is in my house, mind you, and said, excuse me, Stephen, I've been holding my breath for a very long time. I won't be holding it anymore. I'm just going to breathe, and whatever happens, happens. And here we are, 2026, disclosure's been discussed in the Senate, you know, governments, American governments discussing it, talking about it, whatever. And I've always said, throughout 40 years, I've always said, whenever we come close to disclosure to you, a government saying, yeah, UFOs and aliens exist, we may not know what they're doing or what they're here. I mean, they do, but they're not going to tell you all that. They're not going to admit to abductions either. So, but I don't understand why we need, you know, some government to tell us what we all know. There's enough evidence out there. There's enough eyewitnesses. You know, people go to jail in criminal cases in court because someone gives evidence against them. There doesn't necessarily has to be a body, for example, but someone gives evidence against you, and on that evidence, if it's credible enough, you could go to jail and get locked up for life maybe. But that same person, that witness, you know, walks out and sees a UFO and goes back to tell everyone, they'll laugh at him. You know, it's some people are credible when giving evidence to support police or whatever, but when they're giving evidence to support UFOs and that, they're completely not credible anymore. So it'll be interesting to see where we're at the moment, but I doubt that any information we get from government is going to be the truth. You know, they'll try and hide it as best as they can, and until the aliens want to show themselves to everyone around the world, they've shown themselves to a lot of people, but it's not good enough, I guess, and until everybody in the world gets to see them, people aren't going to believe until then.
Oui, alors j'ai quelques questions justement concernant, on va revenir tout au début, concernant avec l'histoire avec tes amis où vous êtes restés figés.
Sure.
Est-ce que tu as l'impression que c'était le phénomène OZ, comme si c'était une bulle dans le temps, comme si on avait appuyé sur un bouton où le temps s'était arrêté?
Well, certainly time stopped for my friends. Every single one of them, time stopped for them. Yeah, I guess they experienced missing time and didn't know it.
Et est-ce que tu penses que est-ce que tu les touchais, ils étaient solides, ou est-ce que tu les touchais, tu pouvais passer ta main à travers eux?
When I was on the roof with my friends in Lebanon, the two beings were in the craft. They were in the object. I could not reach them, didn't touch them, no, but they were solid. I could see through the dark window that there were two physical beings in there, but I couldn't reach them to touch them.
Là, je reviens quand tu étais dans la voiture avec ton ami de l'époque, où tu as vu la lumière qui brille, qui stoppait.
Oh, are you saying in 1988? Yeah, what was the question about that?
Ouais. Est-ce que vous vous êtes fait enlever cette nuit-là?
Not when I was with her. not in on February 1988, no, but in
Ok.
July the 12th, 1988, when I was at my parents, yes, I was.
Ok. Quand tu parles aussi, quand tu as été enlevé et que tu as été figé et que tu dis qu'il y a l'électricité statique qui monte de la tête aux pieds,
Yeah.
est-ce que tu penses que la technologie a agi sur tes chakras?
I'm not too sure, but the sensation was from my feet all the way to the top of my head. So I'm sure, it would have done the same thing to chakras and so on. But yeah, it's not something I've thought about too much, to be honest. But look, with something I want to mention is in 2004, Bill Chalker was researching, doing, some research to write the book Hair of the Alien, which was printed and released in 2005. He was at my parents' house where I had my experience in 1988, and he was talking to my brother. My brother said to him that when he was sitting in the chair, he became paralyzed. He couldn't move. And he said, where my brother was sitting, he was the back door and the front door, you can see straight through. And he was sitting on a chair next to the back door, and he could see all the way to the front door, down the hallway, the corridor. And he said he saw me being floated out of my room, like I'm laying on my back floating, and there's one creature in front of me and one on either side near my shoulders, like just near my head more so. And they gliding me through, they were walking, I was gliding, heading towards the front door. And my brother got scared and thought that was my soul, and that I'm taken, these are evil, this is whatever, I'm dead, and they're taking my soul. And he freaked out. He got so scared that he thought I was dead and they were taking my soul. As they were talking about this, my mother entered the room. She walked into the room, and she asked, "Oh, what are you talking about?" Because there's this, in her house, there's this guy doing some investigation. She doesn't really understand fully in English, so she asked my brother, "What's going on? What he's doing?" And my brother said, "Oh, he's investigating." Researching information about Peter's story in 1988, what happened to him. And my mum said she's never, in her whole life, she had never said anything about this to us. As I said, we grew up Maronite Christian. We never discussed UFOs at home as a topic. It wasn't an interest of anyone. So my mum made the comment, which really blew me away. I've never heard her say this. She said, "Oh yeah, when we were children, when we were young, we'd see flying plates all the time, but our parents would always tell us that they're Israeli spy planes. Everything in Lebanon that's exotic flying around is Israeli spy planes, obviously, And she said, "Oh, so we used to all think they're Israeli spy planes." She said, "But we saw them a lot." And she said, "There's one time I never forget." She goes, "I remember this." She said, "Peter, my son, was 22 days old." So I was born in April 1964. This is in May 1964. She said, "Peter was 22 days old. And at 3:00 in the morning, she said she was sitting down breastfeeding me. And as she was breastfeeding me, she saw an alien at the window." Now, in Lebanon, you've got your windows, glass window, and then on the outside, it's got wooden shutters. They're like louvered wooden shutters, like some of your cupboards are. And, you close the wooden shutters just to have more security. But in summer, she had them open or whatever. And she saw standing at that window was a alien looking thing, but it had white hair, milky white skin, very similar to my description of the blonde female that I saw. White skin, milky skin. It's as if where they live, there's no sun, or they don't see the sun, and their skin is so milky white. I never heard her mention this in my life. And she said, "I'm looking at this person." She didn't use the word alien. She said there was a person looking at me through the window, and he had big eyes. She said he had big, beautiful blue eyes, and he had his hair parted from over his ear, like way on the side, parted over, but he had thick hair. And she said it came like just past down to his neck, and he was wearing a black or a dark skivvy, rolled up under his chin. And she said he was looking. She made the point to say he wasn't perving at me, and she actually said he wasn't looking at me feeding my son. He was looking at my son. So wherever his gaze was, but she knew he was looking at me, not looking at her, as in watching her breastfeed me, looking at her like that. She said, no, he was looking at my son. So I'd never heard her mention that before. We never discussed anything like that before. I wish we got it on video. I know Bill's got notes that he's made, and he may even have an audio. I think he's trying to see if he does. That really blew my mind. And now my mum has dementia. She's in a nursing home. So she doesn't remember who I am. I go to visit her. She doesn't know who I am. So it's like that was an opportunity lost. We should have somehow videotaped it and kept that as a record. But, my brother was there. Bill Chalker heard it himself. It's not like it's something I'm making up because my mother can't remember now. Other people there, she told them when she told me. So I found out about it when they found out about it, same time. I would love nothing more at this stage now than, look, I don't think we'll ever get the truth about alien abductions. They might own up and say, yeah, they've been visiting or they're here, whatever, but they're not going to admit to alien abductions because maybe not in Australia or other parts of the world, but I know in America there's a lot of litigation and, people will take class action against governments, for whatever reason about alien abductions or whatever. Someone had an experience and the government didn't give them the right advice or whatever. And it can get messy. So, but for people like me, I don't need a government to tell me the truth. I know the truth.
On sait déjà que les Américains collaborent ont collaboré avec des gris, notamment sous la présidence de Eisenhower. Même, on sait aussi que les Américains collaborent avec les grands blancs, ce qu'on appelle les grands blancs, qui sont des styles nordiques, comme toi et ta maman décrivent. Et ce que ça prouve aussi, c'est que quand ta maman a vu cet être-là à travers la fenêtre, ça prouve que t'es suivi étant tout petit aussi.
Yeah, I personally believe that President Eisenhower did meet with aliens. I believe that there was a treaty. And I also believe that it's disgusting that a government can sell off its citizens for exchange for technology, allowing whatever species. I don't care if they're benevolent, malevolent. I don't care if they're doing it to enhance humanity in the future. But when you do these things to people and you have a treaty that you allow, beings from other planets or look, some of these beings, I believe, have been living on our planet for thousands of years anyway. We think everybody comes from outer space, but I believe a lot, there's a couple of species, at least a few species that are present on our planet, It's a topic close to my heart, and it upsets me that you can allow your citizens to be taken for exchange of and experimented on or whatever for exchange for technology. It's just ridiculous, and I don't think they will ever own up to that.
Le trou dans la tête que tu as parlé tout à l'heure, est-ce que tu penses qu'ils t'ont inséré un implant?
I have no doubt that they inserted an implant because in 1992, in May of 1992, I had a head injury. I got attacked at work, and I got hit on the head. I got stabbed with a knife in the chest. I got hit on the head, sharp edge with a shovel. I had extensive injuries, and one day I was sitting down with my partner, my wife. We were sitting down in the lounge room, and I had the coffee table in front of us, obviously, and I was sitting there, and I think the next day or the day after I was going to do a CT scan to do a scan on my head to see how extensive this injury was. And I was sitting there and I was touching that spot she was sitting next to me to my left. So I was sitting there and I was touching it and I could feel like a little wire, almost like steel wool. And it was pricking me. I could feel a wire and a steel wire here. And I kept picking at it. And then I said, can you have a look and see, can you see anything there? She had a look and she's like, no, it just looks like a stump, like a little bit of hair coming out, the thicker one. And I think that's what I was touching, and she thought it was hair. But anyway, I kept picking at it. I kept touching it. And within a couple of minutes later, something fell out of here, and it was almost metal. It wasn't skin, or it wasn't dry blood. Like, this is years later anyway, but it wasn't part of my scalp. It was something solid, and it fell out of my head. As I touched it, it fell. It hit the coffee table. It landed on the coffee table, bounced. I wish it stayed on the coffee table because I would have had that as evidence as well. But it bounced off the coffee table, landed between my feet on the floor, and we had carpet, and it was thick carpet at the time. It was long carpet. So I went and grabbed a vacuum cleaner and I put a tissue Kleenex on the front of it, and I tried to suck it up. But I think because it was like wire-like, it was stuck in the fibers in the carpet. So I couldn't get it out. I couldn't find it. I couldn't see it. I don't know if it dissolved, like disappeared or what, but I was never able to find that. But we both definitely heard it fall. It made a click noise on the table and then bounced off the table and landed on the carpet. So it fell out, I'd say, a day or two before I had to go and do a CT scan.
Et au scanner, ils ont rien trouvé dans ta tête?
No. No.
Et cette femme aux yeux bleus dont tu parles, est-ce que selon toi, c'est une hybride?
The females from 1992.
Yes.
Yeah, look, if they're not hybrid, they're a race that could walk among us. They could be your neighbor. They could work with you, and you probably might think, oh, that's a very attractive person with some unusual features, but you wouldn't think it's alien. You'd have a coffee with them probably and you wouldn't even know.
Les preuves matérielles que tu as gardées, les poils que tu as extraits, qu'est-ce qu'ils sont devenus aujourd'hui?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, actually. When I gave the hair sample to be tested, I didn't know how much of the hair would be damaged. I didn't know if I'd get the hair back. I don't know if they would damage the whole hair to get the DNA samples. So, some people say to me, "Oh, you should have kept the hair. You could have." Well, this is how it eventuated. I gave them the hair to test, not expecting to get the hair back. When they finished all the testing, the hair, Bill Chalker had the hair for 10 years. He kept the hair, and it came to a point where I said, look, my kids asked about it, whatever, and I said, I want it back, and I got it back, gave it to me straight away. And Bill is always about chain of events. So when he gave me the hair back, it was photographed. He had a letter that I had to sign. So there's a good chain of events of the hair being handled and who had it. So once I got that hair sample, which I've sent you a picture of, you can see an image of it. I still have that. That image that I sent you, that is the piece of hair that I still have to this day. I have that. Now, for 28 years, I've been telling Bill Chalker and Dr. Horace Drew, who was the oversaw the DNA testing. I remember Dr. Horace Drew years ago telling me that they kept the DNA sample in a little vial, in a little tube, and that it was in his safe and it was, well contained. And he said to me, back then DNA was just starting. He said, we're like a toddler. We haven't even started to walk yet. We're just learning to crawl, and DNA is going to become something much, much more advanced in the future. So we've got this little bit of DNA. We're going to keep it. 28 years now. For the last, say, 5-6 years, I've been telling Bill and everybody when I do a podcast, I was told that there was a small tube with DNA in it that was available. And I kept urging Dr. Horace Drew to have a look, and he's, I love that guy because he's just like, he's open-minded, and that's what you want scientists to be. You want them to be open-minded, and I knew that he made that comment to me and told me, but he had forgotten. And last year I did, in 2025, I was in Canada, and I appeared on I was a guest of Chris Ramsey on Area 52 podcast. And I said it then again. I said, Dr. Horace Drew told me, 25, 26, 27 years ago that there was a sample that was in his safe somewhere, and if he looked, he'd probably find it. And after that podcast, Chris Ramsey contacted me a couple of days later, and he said, guess what? Dr. Horace Drew reached out to Chris Ramsey and told him, yeah, I found the tube Peter's talking about. I have it. So Bill Chalker went over to Dr. Horace Drew, took some photos of him handing it to him, and, chain of evidence and so on, and brought it to me. And now I have the hair sample, whatever's left of it, which has been washed. When they did the DNA testing, it was chemically washed. So I don't think there's going to be much DNA in that. Someone said to me, give us the hair, we'll destroy it. You won't have the hair anymore, but we'll tell you what these aliens eat. I don't care. I'm not interested. I'd rather keep the hair. It's only a small sample. And, there's a lot of people out there who will make comments on podcasts. Yeah, I bet you he doesn't have the hair. Yeah, I bet you he doesn't have that there. But I do. And, I'm not going to bring him out and show it to people and say, this is this, that. No, I've got them. And there are people who know that I've got them. Yeah, that's where I stand at the moment. I really don't care what people think anymore. I've been talking about this for so many years. All I'm trying to do is present the evidence and let people decide for themselves. If you're really interested, I'd advise you to have a look at Hair of the Alien. All the procedure for the DNA testing is fully listed in there. There's a lot of good information about it, actually. And if you're interested in that side of it, by all means, and, although it doesn't prove that the DNA was alien, out of this world, planet, whatever, out of this universe, it does back up my story in that there were two females. One was blonde, one was Asian. There was, interaction going on, and the DNA test seems to prove it. Like, I cannot fake a hair like that. I don't think anyone can fake a hair like that. And fortunately enough for me, I had the root and the shaft of the hair, which gave us that, double DNA type mix thing. And look, I think, not because it's my case, I think it's intriguing. I think it's fascinating that you can have some science behind it. But, for me personally, the cases that I looked at when I first became involved in the UFO field and wanted to understand what I was going through, people like Travis Walton, the Travis Walton experience, 1975. I've met Travis. We spent a day together with his ex-partner in Queensland. We had a great day, actually. There's certain cases, the Betty Barney Hill. There's a handful of cases that really caught my attention. And, even the Admiral Byrd thing, a lot of people have question marks over that, but they're the things that interested me and got me to start buying a lot of books and, reading a lot of books. And, if anything, I'll tell you, before I had my UFO alien experiences, I hadn't read a book from cover to cover since, I was at school. I never read a book from cover to cover, never finished a book. And after that, I read a lot. Like, I can be reading 3 books at one time now, and I would never have done that before. And it's just changed my life for the better. I'm a different person. I'm a better person. I think differently than a lot of people. And, I've had nothing but there's been hard times. I've got to admit that, but at the same time, it's been a learning experience and a growing experience. And I'm happy to have this experience and talk about it.
Je te posais la question pour le cheveu parce que tu sais que je travaille pour le MUFON et on a un laboratoire à disposition dans le Missouri où on aurait pu analyser aussi si jamais avec l'avancée de la technologie, il y a des bénévoles scientifiques qui s'y intéressent.
Yeah, there's been a number of scientists making inquiries, more so I think with Bill Chalker or Dr. Horace Drew. In 2011, I appeared on a TV show, and we did the interview. You know, they left, and then the next day I got a phone call from one of the people involved in it who had a scientific background, and he asked me to do a polygraph test. He asked me if I'd sit a lie detector test. And instantly, as soon as he asked me, Peter, would you sit a lie detector test? I was like, yep, let's do it. I've been wanting to do one for 20 years. And the show was called My Mum Talks to Aliens, which is about Mary Rodwell and her son. She took him around Australia for 2 weeks to show him her evidence, and the evidence didn't stack up. And then they used my case to, you know, show him that there were good cases out there. And yeah, he threw it out. He asked me to do a lie detector test, and I said, yep, I'll do it. And he was surprised that I said I'd do it so quickly, you know, didn't even have to think about it. And myself and an ex-SAS Navy SEAL, Australian Navy SEAL, sat the test separately, obviously not together. And all his memories were retrieved for regression, hypnotherapy regression. And that's another reason why I don't use my regression retrieved information as evidence, because it can be questionable. But all his information that he's retrieved were done through hypnotherapy regression sessions. But unfortunately for him, he failed the polygraph test. And fortunately for me, but the only reason I took that test and I agreed to do it straight away, agreeing to do it, was because my belief was that a lie detector test will tell if 100% if you're telling the truth or lying. It'll pick you out. I didn't know that people can deceive it, or there's people trained to deceive it. That wasn't in my head. I just thought, when he asked me on a Sunday, we did an interview on a Saturday. Then on the Sunday, the next day, he asked me if I would do a lie detector test, polygraph. And on the Wednesday, they came around and we did the test. Anyway, what I'm trying to get to is I ended up passing the polygraph test. So every test that's been thrown at me, and this started in 1992. This case started. Now we're looking about 34 years down the track, or whatever it is. Usually over time, a case will come undone. You know, there'll be things that'll come up and it'll discredit the case or make the case look weak. But my case stands on its own merit. It's got the DNA evidence. I've passed the polygraph test. Now, since then, I've been asked to take a polygraph test and a drug test. And I don't understand that, because I passed the polygraph test, and the person that asked me to do the test, when the polygraph examiner said, Peter's telling the truth, Peter passed the test, my comment after that was, okay, I'm happy. And I asked what the scientist thought, and he said, I believe Peter believes it. And that really upset me, because you asked me to do the test. I passed the test, and now you're saying Peter believes it. So basically you're saying, I don't think it's real, but Peter believes it's real, which is wrong. That's like moving the goalpost when you're playing a game just to suit your team. You know, it's not right. So I'll never, ever do another polygraph test, because I've seen how they try and set people up for it. I've already done one. I've passed it. It meant nothing. You know, to him, it was like, oh, Peter believes it. And I got asked to do they wanted to do a movie about my life, and they filmed at my house for 3 months. They went to Lebanon and filmed in Lebanon on the roof of a building where I had that child sighting for 2 weeks, and interviewed family and so on. And when they came back, they said, oh, we want to do another polygraph test, which I swore I would never do again anyway, and a drug test. And I said, hang on a minute, like, this happened in 1992. What's it got to do? What's a drug test going to answer? What questions, you know, what's it going to say? Like, why would you even ask me that? It's just people are always trying to find a weakness or something they can catch you out with. And it's been 34 years since the 1992 case. And I haven't come across anybody with some, decent critics. It's just stupid comments more than I love peer review. I think every case should be peer reviewed. And I've taken on the Skeptics Association. I took on their president, Bill Chalker, and I were at a local TV station, and they invited at the time Barry Williams, who was the head of the Australian Skeptics Association. And I'm not shy to debate anybody about my case or the topic. I'll do it anywhere, any place. I'll give you the evidence about my case. If you can discredit it, good on you. And you know what? Yeah, I put my hand up. I'll say first. I'll be one of the first to say, my case does not prove that aliens exist. The hair samples I provided may not prove that aliens exist, but what they do prove is that my version of the story, that something entered my house, interacted with me, I swallowed something from them, they left hair samples, they disappeared. There was two of them, one blonde, one Asian. It's supported by all this evidence around it. And if anybody can, wants to discredit it and can, good luck to them, But this is one thing I don't understand either. If I don't believe in a topic, if I don't believe in a subject, whether it's gardening or cooking, I'm not into that. I wouldn't be commenting about it. I wouldn't be going on the internet looking at a podcast or, a presentation by some person and start criticizing them and what they're doing and how they're doing it. I'm not interested. I'm not wasting my time. And that's why I shouldn't actually reply to any comments that are just stupid. There's a lot of good quality comments from people and a lot of support. And, that's what I'm about. I'm about connecting with these people. I'm not trying to sell my story. I'm not trying to make money. If anything, you look around in my office, my experiences have cost me a lot of money out of my own pocket. I used to hold conferences and meetings, and I used to pay for them. Sometimes I'd get my money back. Sometimes I wouldn't, And to me, it's never been about money. It's always been about sharing my story and reaching and connecting with people who have had similar stories. I was fortunate enough in my time to work with people like Bud Hopkins and Professor John Mack. And, I've met people, everybody involved in this field. I've had an opportunity, to have some interactions with them. And, I don't chase the fame. I'm not trying to speak at every conference around the world. I'm not about that. I got asked to go to Peru in 2011 and to speak at, it's called the Brotherhood Conference. And they even listed me before I even agreed to go. They had me in their advertising. And I remember there was a bishop, archbishop, and there was a astronaut, like in their clothes. The astronaut had his astronaut gear, the bishop had his. So yeah, they had me on there, and I didn't go and I've always wanted, Peru has been big on my travel list. I've always wanted to go to Peru, but there was just something about it that I didn't like, and they ended up asking me to pay for my own ticket to go there, and it was about $4,000. And there was no way for me to know whether I'd get my money back or not. So I thought, no, it's cost me enough money out of my pocket. If you want me to come to your country and speak, maybe you should cover the cost, sort of thing. But I'm not chasing that sort of thing. I'm just happy just to have people contact me and tell me their stories. Like I've recently, due to all the podcasts I've done, I've had a lot of people contact me, and it's been so positive. Like, people from all around the world are so supportive of me. I've been at work on 2 occasions after doing Area 52 podcast where people have walked up to me from bridal parties. I work in security, so, I'm at a venue now where there's weddings and stuff. I don't want to talk much about that side of my work. But, I've had people who were at a wedding party, part of the wedding group, groomsmen, and they come up and see me, and they're like, "Oh, is your name Peter? I saw you. I want to thank you for having the courage." And I was at dinner for a farewell dinner for a friend who retired from work, and someone walked up to me and out of the blue and, said, "Oh, I really respect what you've done. Thank you for your courage. Can I shake your hands?" And the people at the table with me, there were 6 other people. They didn't know. I've worked with them for over 12 months. They did not know anything about my UFO experiences. They did not even know that I believed in UFOs. And they were sitting at the table, and once the guy asked me, "Can I shake your hand and thank you for having the courage?" And one of them said, "Did you go to Canada to do this podcast?" I said, "Yeah." And he was like, "Oh, we all got Google. We're going to Google you now." I said, "Mate, go for it. There's a lot to read." I said, "There's a lot of information out there." So yeah, it's not like everybody I work with knows me or knows what I do, but now, because I've done, a few podcasts, people are sort of recognizing me, and it's not something I really enjoy, but you put yourself in the public eye, you go public with something, and you're going to get negative and positive input and feedback. And so far it's been nice interactions. I've got no complaints.
Moi, je pense que votre témoignage est important pour le monde entier et que c'est tout à votre honneur. Et d'ailleurs, ça se voit que tu as vécu ça. Ton body language parle de toute façon et tu as toujours la même histoire. Ton narratif ne change pas.
Yeah, thank you for noticing that, because I think consistency has been the basic strength of my case. It's always been the same, consistent. I don't look. I've met people who have some good cases, but the case seems to evolve every year. Something new, something new. For me, I tell it as it is. There's no need for me to try and make it colorful or make it more interesting than what it is and add stuff. It is what it is, and it may not be the answer to the biggest question we have, but it makes people think, and I'm happy with that.
Juste pour que les gens aient une idée, les tests ADN, combien ça coûte à peu près?
Okay. Back in the 90s, when they did conduct the test, I believe it was around over $2,000 for the test. And since then, in our time now, 2026, I think it's a lot cheaper. And what's even more important now, what used to take weeks and weeks to collect, to get DNA, to find DNA and so on, they can now do, hundreds and thousands of units more, and they can do it in hours. Like I said, I do have a small sample of DNA in that tube. The head scientist seems to think that there may not be enough. It's probably degraded over the years. It's been 28 years. But you know what? I'm happy to have the hair, keep the hair, don't destroy that. But that DNA sample that's in that tube, it's only minute. I can hardly even see it in there. I'm happy to have that tested if we need to. It could have DNA still in it, but we'll never know, maybe, unless we test it. So we'll see. I know a couple of people have said, "Oh, they'll fund it, they'll pay for it," and that. But yeah, I'm open to it. It depends who and where, and yeah, I'm not just going to allow anybody to take that sample and test it. It'll have to be a proven, credible lab.
Oui, d'accord. On en reparlera après en privé pour l'échantillon. J'ai quelques pistes.
Yes.
Je te contacte aussi parce que j'ai eu 2 cas qui sont similaires au tien.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Un cas belge, Philippe Derek, que j'ai déjà interviewé sur ma chaîne, qui a eu des relations avec une entité et au moment d'éjaculer, il y avait plus d'ADN sur les draps. Et les draps étaient secs quand il s'est réveillé. Il s'est réveillé traumatisé avec une entité qui le chevauchait.
In Belgium? Was it in Belgium? Yeah.
Oui, c'est en Belgique. Et oui, il a eu une relation avec une entité. Il avait été aussi fixé, paralysé. Et au moment d'éjaculer, il n'y avait aucune trace sur les draps. Et tout avait disparu, en fait, miraculeusement.
Very interesting. What year and what's the name of the gentleman?
Philippe Derek. Il est
The
sur je l'ai
legend.
interviewé sur ma chaîne.
Okay.
Je te mettrai en contact si tu veux.
Yeah, I'll definitely have a look. I'll definitely have a look at that. Sounds interesting.
Et un autre cas que j'ai eu, une personne qui m'a contacté, mais au Canada, dans la région du Saskatchewan. C'est un témoignage anonyme d'une personne qui a eu des relations avec une blonde aux yeux bleus et il a trouvé dans son lit des cheveux avec des fibres collées et les cheveux étaient comme en forme de boucle, de nœud. Les cheveux faisaient, les cheveux étaient en forme de boucle et ils ont retrouvé ça dans le lit, une poignée de cheveux avec des fibres collées.
That's interesting because in Australia we've had a number of probably 6 different people who came forward, witnesses, and they actually said, some of them said that they read my story, whether it was in a magazine or in the book, they read my story. And as they were reading my story, they basically made the comment and they said, oh, I'm sick of human women. I wish aliens would come and take me, you know. And then within 2 weeks, they had very similar experiences to me with a blonde female, an Asian female as well. They found hair on their private area. And the difference is now 2 of those hairs, 2 cases, Bill Chalker and the APEC team, they tested 2 separate hairs from 2 different experiences. And they came back, the hairs matched the person's wife and the second one matched the person's daughter. Now, what happened was they're saying that they read my story. 2 weeks later, they had the experience. They took the hair off their private area and they dropped it. One of them said he put it on the sink next to the hand sink to wash. The other one said he dropped it on the ground. About 2 hours later, went back and picked it up off the ground and put it in a bag. And the other one picked it up off the sink and put it in a bag or whatever. There's another 2 cases. They say they have hair samples in a plastic bag, but they don't know where they've put them. They're in a drawer. They've put them in a drawer somewhere and they have to look for them. Then I had one case where a guy said he had an experience before me in 1992, 2 weeks before me, and it was exactly the same with a blonde and an Asian. He's the first person I've ever spoken or heard from that claims to have had the experience similar to mine, but before mine. So we've had probably about 6 different cases where people have, alleged that they have hair samples, and a couple of them have been tested, but the results haven't been anything like what they found with me.
Ces cheveux-là dont je te parle, la personne l'a analysé et le gène ressortant majeur, ça serait la Lituanie.
Okay, yeah. Well, the root of the hair, the blonde Basque Gaelic, that's Scandinavian type DNA, from what I've been informed.
C'est intéressant parce que cette personne-là m'a plus jamais donné de nouvelles, parce que je lui ai demandé qu'elle m'envoie pour les faire analyser aussi une partie des cheveux, et cette personne-là, elle demeure sans réponse. Et ça, c'est frustrant parce que je lui avais demandé qu'elle m'envoie des cheveux ou pour qu'on puisse le faire analyser à notre niveau.
Yeah, unfortunately, I get the same. I get a lot of people contact me. I'll speak to them for 2-3 hours on the telephone, and they tell me they have photographs or they tell me they have pictures, of scratches on their bodies or evidence or hair, and then I never hear from them again. If I had my advice to people, if you think you've got evidence, don't hold on to it because it's going to be lost for eternity. Get it tested. There's a lot of places now around the world. I mean, you can get on your computer and you can reach anybody around the world. There are people who will support to pay for the testing. You don't have to pay for it out of your own pocket. But yeah, if you have evidence, it's no good telling people about it. Produce it and let's test it. That's what I'd love to see.
Est-ce que toi, tu as eu de la visite des Men in Black suite à ton cheveu que tu as récupéré et l'analyse?
I personally haven't had any contact with any type of men in black or pressure from anyone except one incident that happened to me. Um, it happened in the local shopping centre in Auburn, which is the next suburb, the next town next to me. Um, I didn't want to read too much into it, but I had three people well dressed in suits. At the time, I thought they were, police detectives because there's a police station right there. And I thought, nothing of it. I just walking past, I saw them walking, but they were looking at me. One of them crossed the road. The other two stayed on the other side of the road. One of them crossed the road towards me. And I was at a fruit shop. I was on the footpath and I was reaching over to grab some fruit and put it in a bag. And this gentleman came and reached over me. As I had my arm out, he reached over me. So his head was right here. As he reached down, he was right here. And he said to me, "You talk too much. You need to stop talking about this." And I just thought, I'm sorry. I just thought, fuck off. Because I don't interact with people and go tell them what to do. And if I don't know that, I don't. So for him to come over and say, "You talk too much, you need to stop talking," I just said, "Fuck off." And he walked away and then walked down the street and then rejoined those other two. So the three of them were back together again. I remember exactly what color suits they were wearing. One was in a blue, one in a gray, and one in a lighter blue. And I actually crossed the road. I stopped doing my shopping. I left the shopping there and I walked across the road and I walked behind them, followed them, and they couldn't walk away quick enough. That's the only time I can say where I thought, maybe someone government connected or something said something to intimidate me and maybe they were interested in my story, or maybe they've looked at my story and thought, no, he needs to shut up. I don't know. But that's the only interaction I've ever had. Look, I honestly now I believe, because my case, it's getting a lot of attention now, and I keep asking the American public, why did it take you? Because a lot of people say, why didn't I know about this case? Oh, it's such a good case. Why didn't I know about it? I've been doing this for a long time. The Americans seem to think whatever happens in America, it's the only thing that happens. That other countries don't experience these things. Well, now they're learning that, yeah, other countries do have people having experiences, and, they're just catching on to my case now, 34 years later, or last year they started, catching up on the case last year. And the book, Hair of the Alien, was written in 2005. So it's either they're not very good researchers or they're not interested in researching anything away from America.
Mais on sera de plus en plus sollicité avec les déclarations du président Barack Obama.
I want to do a little bit of a lightning round here because it's not often I'll get access to the
Come on,
President
man.
of the United States. So a couple questions here. Are aliens real?
They're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in what is it?
Area 51?
Area 51. There's no underground facility, unless there's this enormous conspiracy, and they hid it from the President of the United States.
What was the first question you wanted answered when you became president?
Where are the aliens?
Where are the aliens?
Yeah, I'm hopeful, but apparently, as soon as President Trump said he's going to release UFO files, hundreds and thousands of files went missing. So I don't know. But it's interesting Obama would say that. Maybe they're trying to put pressure on the new, on Trump but yeah, it is interesting. And, I think the public, I think the whole world is ready to know. I think, the new younger generations now, they were brought up, with UFO shows, and they've been spoon-fed all this information over the years. I think the internet has changed the way people think. Every day you look at the internet and you see something new. And now with AI, it's going to be difficult and harder to see what's real and what's not. But there was evidence, a lot of photographic evidence, physical evidence that was years before AI even came along. So there's a whole bunch of things that we can look at. Not everything is AI generated, and someone asked me recently if the Senate inquiry, the Disclosure Project, wanted to use your case, would you allow it? And I've said if they want to, yeah, they can. But I don't know if I want to be the one, discussing it. Maybe someone with higher authority can do it for me. But if I have to, I will. But I'm not I really don't, I'm not pushing for that. If it happens, it happens. And I think we should use the best cases in ufology to present to the world. It's no good presenting questionable evidence to them. You need to put the good, hard evidence that's out there and present it to the public. And I think you'll find that, people are really, really interested in the topic these days.
Oui, oui, oui. Est-ce que l'être que tu as vu sans nombril, pour toi, ça serait un clone?
I believe it's possible, yeah. I believe it's possible. I don't think she was born the way we humans were born. And I think there's a high probability that they might have been clones, yeah.
Est-ce que tu connais ton groupe sanguin?
Yeah, I believe RH negative. Actually, you know what? It's in the filing cabinet right in front of me. I could look it up, but I should know that. I've looked it up a few times, but it's just slipped my mind. But yeah, it's nothing exotic, I don't think. If anything, my new partner has different interesting blood type.
Okay. Parce que selon les groupes sanguins, on peut se diriger d'une personne qui est plus ou moins abductée ou pas. Ça serait intéressant de le savoir.
Yeah, so from the person's blood type, you can tell if they're being abducted or not, or they have a higher percentage of being abducted.
Oui, notamment avec le O négatif ou le O tout court, enfin le O positif, qui pourrait être le sang originel.
Okay. I'll look into that.
Beaucoup le sang originel, les autochtones d'Amérique et autochtones en Australie et Amérique du Sud portent ce sang-là.
Okay. I could tell you exactly my blood type if you give me 1 second. Give me 1 second, I'll get it for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. ORH D positive.
A positive?
ORH D positive. Just there.
Original blood.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is a hair sample from another experience I had, but I haven't got it tested. I'm not sure, but it's from 6/6/2006. So there's a couple of hairs in there. We may get these tested down the track. We'll see. I'm not too sure about these, but I collected them, and I was by myself that night. There was no one in the bed with me. So yeah. So yeah, so is that consistent with the blood type, is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Oui.
I've got to start looking into that because a lot of people are asking questions about blood types now. And yeah, I need to start doing some research about it. It's interesting.
C'est pareil. Est-ce que petit, tu saignais beaucoup du nez?
Funny. Oh, geez. I had the worst nosebleeds the worst nosebleeds. Like, I remember one time this is in Lebanon. This happened in Lebanon when I was a child, right? I was on the toilet and I remember so much blood came out. The whole floor was full of blood. And I remember my brother, I passed out and I woke up with my brother carrying me on his shoulder, running to take me to the doctor. And my mother, when I wake up and I see my mother behind us, running behind us, and there's blood everywhere. I had the worst bleeding noses when I was growing up. There was one time at my parents' we lived in a block of units, a flat, and I was in the bathroom again and I was just pouring out blood. I'd wake up, my bed would be full of blood. Even my son, he would have been probably, I'd say, around 3 or 4 years old. Woke up, his bed was, had blood all over it. And I had very, very bad bleeding noses as a child. Yeah. Even as an adult, I actually lost my job at a place I was working at, a furniture shop, because I got up in the morning and just had a bad nosebleed and I couldn't stop the bleeding. So I didn't go to work. I called in and I said, look, I'm bleeding. I can't stop the bleeding. And I lost my job over it because I couldn't get to work. But yeah, no, all my life, I've had nosebleeds.
Et aussi, un autre fait marquant, c'est souvent aussi les abductés souffrent d'acouphènes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think I've had every symptom reported by anyone that's been abducted and had abduction experiences. I think I cover all the bases there.
Une question qui me tient à cœur, c'est vous qui avez connu le docteur John Mack. Comment a-t-il abordé le sujet avec vous?
Okay. Professor John Mack and I met in 1996. I wasn't expecting to meet him at all. I thought, we'll never get the chance. But I had an experience in 1996 and in my house that I'm in now, where I had my 1992 experience. And I was levitated from my bed and I was taken through the mirror. And there were 3 beings, the hooded ones, the gorilla-looking ones. There was 3 of them. And I remember being taken through the mirror and it felt like I was going through hot jelly, like a thick substance, but a bit more fluid and liquid. And I got through it. But, that's a story on its own. But that happened about 2 weeks before Professor Mack came out, maybe 3 weeks before John Mack came out to Australia. I wasn't aware that he was going to visit Australia, but he was going to be speaking at the Transpersonal Association, Australian Transpersonal Association meeting in the CBD, the business district. And about 3 weeks before he came out, I received a phone call from Dr. Patty Barton, who was the president of the Australian Transpersonal Association. And she asked me if I would be interested in holding a workshop and have Professor Mack get involved and speak to, people who've had abduction experiences. And I jumped at the chance. I thought, wow, how lucky are we to have Professor John Mack's input and attend one of our workshops. So I arranged for it to happen. And first time I met him was when he spoke at the conference. And we spent some time together that night. My partner, his partner, and him we went and had dinner and had a talk and that. Didn't discuss my story much. Didn't talk about the hair sample and that much. And then we actually attended the workshop, and that was for most of the day actually. And then on the way home, when we finished, we were driving back to my house, and John asked me in the car. He said, "Peter, I noticed you let everybody speak about their story and tell their story and share their experiences." He said, "But I didn't hear anything about you, your story, and, how you're dealing with it and that." And I remember telling John then that this workshop was for other people to benefit, not for me. I'm here to help them. And he thought that was really admirable, and he really supported me with that. And then he said, I want to hear your story. Tell me your story. So, we came to my house. We sort of sat down and talked about it. And that's when I pulled out the bag with the sample and said to Professor Mack, this happened to me in 1992. And this is my evidence. And, it hadn't been tested at that stage. And, I spoke to him about my 88 experience, my 92. I explained to him that 3 weeks before he arrived, I had this experience going through the mirror and so on. And, I think John wanted me to be more open and speak about it. But for me, it was about giving others the opportunity to speak. But we discussed my cases and, we talked, and then he regressed me. He put me under regression, and he was really impressed in that he could see that I was petrified. I was sweating, I was nervous, I was scared. And then as soon as I make eye contact with the taller, goldish alien beings, I'm totally calm. And that came out in the regression. And I remember him speaking later to another psychiatrist that was present during the session, and they were discussing it. And she was saying to him, there's no way you can fake that. There's no way you can be sweating 1 minute and shaking, and then instantly you look in some, creature's eyes and you become instantly totally calm and the sweat's gone, you're relaxed. She goes, you can't fake that, and John was saying, using that word, you can't fake it. I spent a lot of quality time with him. He loved my little boy. My son was about, I think, 18 months, just under 2 years. And John and Dominique, his partner, fell in love with my son, and he actually bought him a carved out wooden bear, which we still have. And my son's in his 30s now, and I still have that bear. It was from Professor John Mack, which meant a lot. But when he was in Australia, he'd spend time with my family, and I think he enjoyed being around us because I didn't try and sell him my story. I never tried to push my story in his face, try and spoon feed him, and everything I talk about is Peter Khoury's case and my case. I never did that, and if he wanted to know something, he'd ask me, but I wouldn't bombard him with my story. But if he had specific questions, John would definitely ask me. He and I became really, really close, good friends, and everyone around the world noted that. And I get people now, they'll do artwork with Professor Mack or about Professor Mack, and they'll send me original copies of their artwork, and they'll say, I did this for you as a gift, because I knew how close you were. It was an honor for me to know the guy. I was devastated when I heard he passed. And, I remember calling Dominique at the time, and as soon as she answered the phone and she heard my voice, she started crying, and she said, oh my God, Peter, your voice, it just brings back all those good memories we had. She said, John's gone. And yeah, it was devastating. And I wish he was around now with all these Senate inquiries and, all these government things going on. Let's not forget, though, that Harvard, everybody at Harvard tried to destroy his reputation. They tried to discredit him. They tried to set him up. They tried to sack him. They did everything they could in their power to discredit John. But John Mack wrote 2 books on the topic, Abductions, Human Encounters with Aliens, and Passport to the Cosmos. And he was in the process of writing another book. And I asked if he could write the foreword to a book that I'm writing, and I'm sure he would have if he was alive. And I might even ask Dominique, his partner at the time, if she would do it for me, and I'm sure she would too. But I was disgusted with the way Harvard tried to sanction him and try to shut him up. And I'll quote this from John. I remember him telling me, he said, Peter, I'm not too concerned about my profession now. He said, he was 66 years at the time. And he said to me, I'm at the tail end of my career. He said, I'm 66 years old. I'm going to retire soon. He goes, but I worry about you. He said, because you're in your 30s, you're just starting out and you're a massive target. You've got a big, big target on your back. I worry about you more than I worry about myself. And he also said to me, and I'll quote this word for word, so if people get offended at the language I use, that was the language he used. He said to me, look, I'm a tenured professor. I can study any topic I like. No one can tell me what to study. And he goes, you know what? Fuck them. He goes, I really don't care. And he used the term fuck them. And I applauded him for that, because they were just down and dirty, trying to discredit him and ruin his reputation. And let's not forget, John Mack was the professor who founded the psychiatry department in Harvard in 1966. And just because he started looking into UFOs and abductions and started talking about that and doing, you know, promotional, like going on TV, going on Oprah Winfrey and so on, and saying that he thinks it's real. And some people didn't, a lot of people didn't like it. But yeah, I wish he was around. He isn't around. He's around in spirit. I think of him every day, and you know, may he rest in peace. Yeah, I'm just glad for the time that I did spend with him. You know, we had some good quality time, and I appreciate that.
Il y a beaucoup d'abductés, et dont moi, ont beaucoup de respect pour John Mack.
Yeah, a lot of researchers in the field. A lot of people have had the experience. John worked with a lot of people. Look, I remember when we held the workshop, I held it in the International Pacific Hotel, and they had in their foyer, they had like a rainforest area, and we took a photo there, which I think I've sent that to you as well. And feel free to use any of the photos that I sent you. I'm happy with that. It's okay. But I remember John standing there and saying to me, commenting that, oh, Peter, you know, look at the venue that you've held this workshop. Like, you're not hiding. Like, this is a, you know, good quality venue. And he said, I'm used to in America going down laneways and alleyways and stairs and going down to basements and bunkers to hold these meetings, because it's all, you know, hidden. And yeah, I know a lot of people in the field that have a lot of respect for him, you know, more so than the academics at Harvard, I guess.
Maintenant, il y a encore quelqu'un qui travaille à Harvard, Avi Loeb, qui travaille sur le sujet extraterrestre.
Yeah, I think every university should have an actual course on, you know, UFOs and aliens, and educate the public about it. It's a worldwide phenomenon. It doesn't just happen in one country, and you know, it's limited to that one country. It's happening all around the world. You know, military interactions. It's a worldwide phenomenon, and I'm not sure why it hasn't been studied by universities.
Oui, tout à fait. C'est un sujet qui devrait être étudié.
Yeah, without a doubt.
En tout cas, on va mettre fin à l'interview. Je te remercie pour ta générosité.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me on your show. I hope your listeners, I hope they find it interesting anyway.
Ils vont la trouver très intéressante. C'est une chaîne qui a été ouverte justement pour libérer la parole pour les abductés et les contacter.
That's good. Perfect. Yeah. If anyone, if you want to list my contact, my email address, you're welcome to do that. If people want to contact me, it's not a problem. I'm happy to speak to them.
Avec plaisir, ça sera fait.
Well, thank you for having me. You have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good day. Et comme je dis toujours, seul on va vite, ensemble on va plus loin.
I agree.
Thank you so much. Have a good day, and thank you very much.
You have a good day. Thank you for having me on your show. Pleasure. We'll talk soon.
See you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.